Hello and welcome to the Building Sustainability Podcast with me, Jeffrey Hart. Every fortnight, join me as I talk to designers, builders, makers, dreamers and doers. Together we can explore the wide world of sustainability in the built environment by talking to wonderful people who are doing excellent things. Hello and a warm welcome to episode 104. This episode's guest is Dave Cockcroft, who is returning to the podcast to chat about rebellious acts. Dave was actually the very first episode I recorded for the podcast way back in 2019. So it's about time we had a bit of a catch up. I'll pop a link to episode number 4 with Dave Cockcroft in the show notes. Before the episode, I want to just tell you about a few things that are going on. There is the Retrofit Reimagined. This year there are 5 dates for the festival. We've already missed the one in Bath, but September 28th in London, October 6th in Bristol, October 21st and 22nd at the Centre for Alternative Technology in Machynlleth, and November 11th in Glasgow. If you are interested in retrofit and generally just good building things, then make sure you get along to one of those. Also want to say a massive thank you to George, who has supported the podcast over at patreon.com/building sustainability. Also, a huge thanks to Lloyd Rushton-Jones, George Harris, and Matthew Colburn, who have all supported the podcast at the higher level and will each be getting a hand-carved wooden spoon carved by my own 2 hands. I've got some lovely beech at the moment from a 400-year-old tree that came down in the storms a few years ago. I'm just working my way through that and it is perfect. So look out for those in the post soon. And if you would like to support this podcast, it is independently produced by me. It takes quite a long time and it's quite a lot of hard work. So it would be really gratefully received. If you can support, then please do at patreon.com/building sustainability. But equally, if you can't afford it, then absolutely enjoy this for free. We've had a lovely review. This is short and to the point. I love it. From Freya Freeborg. Probably said that horribly wrong. 5 stars. Natural building to the people. Great inspiration and nerdiness. Yeah. That's what we're going for. If you enjoy this podcast and you have a minute to spare, maybe while I waffle on during this intro, then a quick review over at Apple Podcasts would go a long way to getting more ears hearing the podcast, and it would make me very happy. There's a link to that in the show notes. Other updates from me. The Netcomb Craft School is really starting to take shape. We are booking in courses now for spring of next year when we will open, and we would absolutely love for you to come and join us. So there are going to be courses in various green woodworking, spoon carving, bowl turning. There's going to be some printmaking workshops, baskets made of chestnut bark. You can come and bind a book with a wooden cover. And a Coptic bind, which I'm reliably informed is as old as the Egyptian era, and a whole load of other stuff that we haven't booked in yet. The best way to stay in touch with that is to follow Netcomb Craft School on Instagram. There's a link in the show notes. What else? Earth floors. I have finished some of my favourite floors I think I've ever done recently, and you can have a look at my Instagram to see those. One of them has got this beautiful bathtub in it. I would say sexy floors. Can floors be sexy? Yeah, of course they can. Take a look and tell me what you think. Link in the show notes as well. Right, so we should probably get on with the episode. Dave came to visit the new craft school, and we recorded the conversation there, sat just outside the structure, the roundwood timber frame structure, where the fire pit will be when we make it. As it's an outside recording, there are various bird noises and quite an intrusive plane at one point. And you'll also hear the gentle background noises of spoon carving while we chat. Dave has sent through loads of links to things that have inspired him to get to this point in his thinking. So do check out the show notes and dig into them. Definitely listen right to the end because I will be giving away the very first spoon carved in the Nethercombe Craft School from a very special bit of wood that we talk about later. So don't miss your chance to win that. And the final thing before I unleash Dave's wonderful thoughts on you is that I wanted to share something from last weekend, which is fitting to the episode. So last weekend I attended the bowl gathering, which was 100 and something, maybe 140 people in a field nerding out thoroughly about turning bowls from wood on foot-powered lathes. This would have been the method that most wooden bowls were made up until the invention of the electric lathe. And this craft was on the verge of extinction when all the bowl turners switched to electric. George Lely was in fact the last bowl turner, single-handedly keeping the skills and traditions alive. So recently, Brian Moist, Lely's great-nephew, has been on a Lely quest, researching his mother's side of the family. He's learning loads about George Lely as a result and went to turn a bowl with Sheriff Adams. He also unearthed this gorgeous little newspaper article that Sheriff read at the bowl gathering, and I thought you might enjoy it. Mr. Lely is the last craftsman of his kind in the country. He makes wooden bowls and platters by hand using a method that goes back to the Middle Ages, and usually, I gather, he does not take particularly kindly to sightseers who go to watch him at work. When Miss Adkins visited him some time ago, however, he apparently decided that she was seriously interested in his craft. He let her choose a piece of elm, and then he worked it into a bowl for her. She now possesses 2 Lely bowls, of which she is very proud. Mr. Lely, described as the happiest man alive, is sad about one thing. There is no one to succeed him in the business his family has carried on for 3 centuries. And as Sheriff Adams said as he read that out, just imagine how pleased Lely would be to know that there was now hundreds of people enjoying this craft, geeking out. And really, it is a thing that is booming in popularity. Right, that's it. I'm back at the end. Enjoy Dave Cockcroft. But do you know what I realised, though? You were episode number 4 of the podcast, and you're going to be episode 104
Hooray!
of the podcast. So,
I wondered if that was going to work out. I just listened to 103. I thought, I wonder if I'll be 104.
Yeah. So, you're back for your century.
Century. And I'll hold my bat up on my spoon in the air. wave to the crowds.
But this is a slightly slight anomaly in terms of podcasting for me. Normally I've got a whole load of questions and I've done lots of prep. And this time it's sort of reversed.
A little bit. I might ask you some questions.
I don't know how I feel about that.
You'll enjoy it.
Yeah. But you posited the idea that we were going to talk about
why I carve spoons while the world burns.
And I like that a lot. It feels like a thought I've had quite a lot. So yes, I was very interested in the topic.
Right. Well, I've done a bit of thinking. And I have to say this is sort of ideas I'm developing in dialogue with other people.
Yep.
And I have a kind of framework, and I've thought a lot about in a way, I want to kind of radicalise spoon carving and say this isn't just some silly hobby we do in our spare time, but it's actually quite a profound practice that helps us as individuals and as a community, that we are each reshaped by this practice. And I'm not claiming I'm I might claim a few special things to spoon carving, but I'm not claiming it's the only practice that does this.
Yeah.
But it is a practice. I think it has some significant elements to it, such as working with natural materials, working with very sharp things that help. So I want to talk about 3 R's, I've decided. I want to talk about restory, reconnect, and relate, or relating. And then the 4th R is radical, but you'll see the other 3 lead to it being a radical act, in my opinion.
Okay, excellent.
So, why I carve spoons while the world burns. I mean, I think, it is increasingly in the news. I think it would be hard pushed these days not to have a degree of awareness that there are multiple converging crises, including the climate crisis and the freshwater crisis and the toxic pollutants crisis and the rising acidification of the oceans crisis and the loss of soil crisis. Many things. We've got river toxicity in this country now, haven't we?
Yep.
From all the overflow sewagey things in the water. Many crises. And I feel like, I'm quite old now, but I feel like I've been struggling working on all these issues as an activist since the 1980s. I first became aware of the climate issue back then. And I've always been in the Green Party, and I've stood in elections, and I've held office in local authorities, and I've done lots of peace campaigning, and I've been involved in transition towns, and I've been involved in all sorts of things in my local community, like local agricultural, community supported agriculture.
Yep.
So many, and I've studied permaculture, and I gave up flying, and I try and minimise my plastics and my impacts, and eat vegetarian and vegan as much as possible.
Yep.
And all those things you're supposed to do, including I've tried to do the political things and the activism things for half my lifetime now, for 30 plus years, and it feels like it's all made, boggle difference, quite honestly.
Yep.
And I think through lots of things I've read recently, and I'm going to have to acknowledge that my son, who's now very involved again in activism, but coming from a slightly different angle, has been very influential in some of the things he pointed me at and some of the contacts he had with people from different cultures. He has a lot of contacts with people in the with youth groups in the global south, who are coming from very different perspectives. So the reason I think all my efforts have come to nothing is because they were seated within the dominant stories we live by. So if you look at the primary ways it's being proposed we escape from the carbon dioxide pollution problem, the atmospheric carbon dioxide and the global heating and everything, it's kind of saying we do more of the same, except slightly different. We're still going to have capitalism, we're still going to have growth, we're still going to have exploitative practices, except this time we're going to exploit lithium for batteries.
Yep.
Instead of hydrocarbons for oil. It's kind of saying somehow we're going to wriggle out of it by doing the same thing, only slightly different. And it's not changing. You're still trying to live within this growth paradigm, for example, which doesn't make any sense. And I think that any efforts made within that dominant modernity Western culture are doomed to fail, because that fundamental premise, that story that we live by of capitalism, commodification, exploitation, wage slavery, etc., is a broken model.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just, you can see how everything's breaking down a little bit at the moment. You know, how tough it is for Gen X. They're never going to be able to afford their own houses in the UK.
Sure, yeah.
You can see how terrible it is all around the world, how there's increases in people trying to escape terrible situations, whether that's famines and droughts or wars or whatever. You know, the numbers of people trying to get to other countries is only going to increase.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm going to suggest, anyway, that the fundamental underlying issue for us is that part of the stories we live by are that we have disconnected ourselves from nature.
Mm-hmm.
We have even the notion that we are separate from nature.
Yes.
Is a disconnection.
Yeah.
We have disconnections. We have our mind-body separation is a disconnection where we don't even regard ourselves as a whole.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of new, you know, in recent times and more generally known stuff now where we know even what we vaguely regard as ourself, as an individual, isn't really an individual, but we are, each of us, an ecosystem consisting of millions of bugs that live in and on us, without which we can't function.
Yep.
You know, so you can't, you're not separate. You're not other than nature.
Yeah.
And yet the way we're brought up and educated and the way we, you know, the films we watch, the stories we read, all lead us to think of this separateness.
Mm-hmm.
So I think within what we're going to call, so to make profound real change, we have to seat ourselves as characters within a new story.
Okay.
We have to re-story the world. And what I'm going to suggest is that the practice of a craft like spoon carving is part of a process of embedding yourself within a new story, a different story.
Okay.
A story that is much more about being connected. That was where I kind of want to move, I suppose, on to things about reconnection. But I think maybe one, two more bits I want to say about re-story first.
Yep.
Do you want to mention that we're carving spoons while we do this?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So we're carving spoons while the world burns, while we're talking about carving spoons.
While the world burns. Yes. We have a spoon each and our knives and
yeah.
finishing off.
So you're sort of saying with the the work that you've done, either sort of politically or activism-y, or that it hasn't made the effort because you're within the system that you actually want. You're playing by the rules of the system that actually causes the harm in the first place.
Yeah,
and
pretty
you can't.
Much.
So it needs a complete shake-up of the entire.
Yes, I mean, I think obviously some of the efforts that are being made within the system, so switching to renewable energy from fossil fuels, is going to be helpful to a degree. Yeah. But I mean, I think it's also really, really clear we're going to have to live with less.
Yeah. And
use less resources.
Yeah.
And one of the phrases I like is less is a 4-letter word. Because no one ever dares talk about less. We still talk about growth.
Yeah.
And more stuff. And throw away, it's hard to get away from living in I mean, your last episode, you were talking
with Helen.
Yep. About some of those changes within, that was interior design and things, wasn't it? About thinking about being less wasteful and more. So those changes will all help.
Yeah.
But I don't think they can go anywhere near far enough. Because they're still embedded within. You're still going to be, even if you're a B Corp, you're still going to be a business that's trying to make profit and grow.
Yeah.
They're not taking that out of the equation. And that almost certainly means even in your best efforts, you're still going to consume more resources, quite likely.
Yep.
And yeah, we need to think about different ways. So one of the things, let's talk about what's different about taking up a craft like spoon carving. And so I think one of the very profound differences is being able to make something yourself.
That you'd normally buy. Yeah.
So that shift, whatever it is that you're making that you'd normally buy, you're shifting out of a consumerist, commodified approach into a craft thing where you have you as an individual, you have agency. You have the ability to make from a piece of wood a utensil that you'll use every day to eat your food or cook your food or hold your food for making a bowl. And whilst that sounds on one level quite trivial, it is actually... I've done a few interviews with people talking about stuff, and what has come up quite a lot is this idea that they find it quite empowering to do that. That you gain a sense of that you're not a passive consumer. You're not just looking at a screen and clicking buttons, clicking the buy now button.
Yeah.
You're actually having to engage with the real world with a sharp tool and a piece of wood and your hands and your brain, and be focused and be present, and gradually skill yourself in being able to create an artifact. So I'm going to talk about that as being, or refer to that as being reconnecting, because I think that reconnects us with being more ourselves, more human, because that is what humans have done through many, many millennia. Through human evolution, we've been makers.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly the period of time that we haven't been makers is sort of a blip on a human scale, or sort of humanity scale.
How do you mean?
As in, if you think about all the time we were makers and all the time we weren't.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Obviously, I mean, if we go back far enough, it's hard to say exactly when.
Are you not thinking, far enough back? Or
well, I am, but even then, I think we used sticks and quite quickly have worked out some sticks were better than other sticks and how to shape sticks and which sticks through the air better. I mean, I know, long ago gets referred to as the Stone Age.
Yeah.
I think it was probably the Stick Age, and just the sticks have rotted. And they ought to recall it the Stick Age.
The Stick Age.
Because I bet we used sticks for all kinds of stuff and only bothered with stones later on.
Yeah.
That's my hypothesis. So,
I like it.
I think, but makers, and whether that was involved in making, spears and things that might help hunt or defend, or whether that was involved in making utensils. I think there was an awful lot of making of baskets, in the age before carrier bags. You had to have something to carry your gear around in, even if it was just a load of nuts you'd found.
Yeah.
So there was always working with your hands. That's why we have this amazing dexterity in our hands, and the remarkable level of nerve connections between hands and brain.
Yep.
You've seen that thing's called the humongulus or something, isn't it? That model of a human where all the parts are scaled by the amount of nerve connections to the brain.
Oh, I've not seen that, no.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's got really giant hands.
Right.
And really big fat lips and quite big genitals.
Yeah.
It's right. So
I wouldn't have ever
different
thought
parts,
lips.
but particularly your hands are, I think his lips and things are quite sensitive areas. Areas where you have a lot of connectivity with your brain, but large areas of your brain are all about working your hands.
Yeah.
In order to be able to manipulate objects and change objects. So obviously when you're spoon carving or basket making or doing another handcraft, you're re-engaging those parts of your brain
Yeah.
that are neglected in much of our modern life, which is a bit button pushy and screen pokey these days.
Yeah.
So when I talk to other folks, well, I'm going to ask you the question actually. Then I'll maybe say what some of the people said. So
Okay.
my question is what does spoon carving do for you? Just fire away. First thoughts.
Well, first
Get into it.
thoughts were, I mean, it teaches kind of, what's the thought? Humility, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
In that it's not simple, and it's, everyone's first spoon looks a bit like a dog chewed old stick, and then those that do decide to keep on practicing, it's refinement and failures, and it's sort of
humility. That's interesting, and it's quite difficult spoon carving.
yes.
So you have to
I
stick
think
at it.
the humility comes from the difficulty. And especially I think because we are so distanced from using our hands to create things, and the use of a knife. I think probably in days gone by, everyone would have carried a knife and used it for all number of things.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's quite terrifying to a lot of people. So that's slightly tangential though. What do I get from it? I get a reason to sit still.
Mm-hmm.
That maybe I wouldn't think to sit still, but I'd think to sit and carve a spoon. And at the end I think, I'm very relaxed and have sort of, my mind's gone to a quite a calm place. Unless it's all gone terribly wrong. But
Happens now and again.
I get community. That's a really big one for me. That's probably what's kept me spoon carving in a large sense. Gathering with other weird and wonderful woody folk.
Yeah. Might come back to that a little bit more when we talk about relating, because that's a very important part of community and relating.
Yeah,
I'd agree with all those things. Humility is interesting. I think you're the first person who said humility, but although I think when I was talking to other folks, they were sort of like, well, I said that too, but they said it in different words.
Yes,
so
of course.
Probably
Yeah,
people
yeah.
did say humility, but in slightly different words.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really interesting one because I'm not sure how, as a lesson, it sounds like it's a different lesson than we're getting from most other things we indulge in.
yeah,
Because much of life these days is about convenience and making things easier.
yeah. And instant gratification.
And instant gratification, yeah. So it's not instant, is it?
No. Oh, well, there is something instant because your first spoon, even though you look back on it.
Yeah, it's only a few hours. It's not like trying to build a building or a chair or a bicycle, all of which take quite a lot longer.
Yes.
And you really don't want them to go wrong. You can afford something fairly small like a spoon to go a little bit not quite right, and then slowly improve. I guess. So some of the things other folks said, well, you said about it might be the same thing. Some people saying it's an escape.
Yeah.
By which I think they mean an escape from their everyday life, and a meditation.
Yes, escape from
a calm
themselves,
place, a flow state. It gives you rapid. I think because of having to concentrate around sharp tools, and I think some stuff I talked about way back in episode 4 was that it gives you quite fast access into a flow state.
Yeah.
Folks said things like, in terms of reconnecting, it helps them connect with their body, get out of their head,
Yep.
and be more embodied.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to be very aware of the feel of the wood and sense the knife engaging in the wood.
Yes.
And you're having to focus your gaze on what you're doing and coordinate with your hands. So it is very embodied activity.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's helping reconnect mind and body.
Yeah. I guess my instant thought of that is a lot of sort of therapy things are about, if you're having a feeling, like where is it in the body? And and I used to teach snowboarding, and it's like some people would have absolutely no idea sort of where their body is in space. And it's, you say, push your hips up or, something, and they wouldn't know. They wouldn't know how to do it. So yes, definitely anything that brings you to know how you are physically.
Yeah.
I think that, and the mental connection with that.
The escape thing, people referring to as escape from overthinking, escape from life's frustrations. So, you could hold it up as a mindful practice.
Yep.
So these are mental health benefits, but they're also about connecting. And some of the women I talked to particularly were saying that as a woman it feels empowering to work with tools like this, particularly perhaps using an axe.
Yep.
Is something, generally there's not a lot of models of women using axes out there.
We'll be back after a quick break.
If you're looking for all things BMX racing, you found the right podcast. Here at Lane 8 BMX Podcast, I'll speak to the local racer, the national racer, and even the Olympic level racers. I'm talking kids to the weekend warriors and much more. So get comfortable, turn up the volume, and remember to snap on green.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, the idea of the lumberjack is sort of the axe wielding, big hairy man.
Yeah.
Probably.
But someone I know, one of the spoon carvers I talked to, who teaches a lot of women carving, say that they find that process, that initial breaking down, starting with a log and splitting it and working with an axe, is the part that people seem to get the most out of on a first experience. Other women, that was just a reflection from and that it's quite hard work. It's physically quite hard. Particularly if you're carving harder pieces of wood. The stuff about being able to once you've practiced and got competency, and developed your skills, then it's about being able to envisage what you want to make, and then being able to do it. That is quite empowering. And with spoons that there's an infinite variety of form and an infinite variety of wood to carve. Yeah. So there's no end to your ability to having got a piece of wood to find the best thing or the thing you want to do in that. Let's see, there's one or two other bits.
Have you been researching this specifically for our conversation, or is this a...
I've been thinking about it quite a lot, and I kind of have the conversations casually.
Yeah.
But I don't normally write notes about what people say.
Fair enough.
So specifically ahead of this conversation, I talked to a few folks and made an attempt to write down what they're saying, but I can't write as fast as people talk. So it's very much paraphrased or I'm getting it wrong in some ways. I hope those people who I spoke to who might think, oh, Dave's misrepresenting what I said now.
I never said that.
I didn't say that. Or I said the same as that one. I said that thing. Anyway, I don't know. I'm sure they won't be like that.
No.
I'm just
They're a nice bunch, the spoon carvers.
They are on the whole. I can't think of any really nasty ones. So those were some of the main things. Oh, then the other bit, all right, connection. The other big connection bit is about connection to nature.
Yes.
And how people talked about how they had, prior to getting into spoon carving, they just thought wood was wood.
Yep.
And that you learn so much about how different woods are by trying to carve them. And you're carving green wood, so it comes fresh off the tree, so then you have to know and recognise different trees. So you develop this or you reconnect with that diversity of properties of the timber. And you develop a deeper appreciation of nature. And the different materials that are available to you to use.
Yeah, I think
to interact with.
It sort of encourages you to look a bit harder. You know, a walk in the woods is suddenly a sort of like a walk through a material store or something.
Yeah.
It's, you know, oh, I want to know what that is. Look at
wonder what
those are
that would be
leaves
like.
I haven't seen before. And I think anything that encourages encourages you to look deeper is...
Yeah. So, I think those, I suppose, in summary, I'm sure there's others that I'm not getting right now. So it's relating or reconnecting, because I'm talking about relating separately in a minute. Reconnecting to some extent with your own body.
Yep.
Reconnecting with you know, taking your time to create something that isn't completely instant. You're reconnecting. I mean, you know, you were saying with having to take quite a humble approach to it. Reconnecting with your humility, that's quite an interesting thing, I think, as well. And other people talked about, you know, feeling empowered, reconnecting with their power to make.
Yeah.
And I think there's something about reconnecting with our ancestors, which is that these are things that earlier generations would have done routinely.
Yeah.
They would have made all sorts of stuff. Not just suggesting everyone sat around making their spoons. They would have made many, many different things. But it gives you some sense, perhaps, of... and maybe it gives you a sense of how precious stuff is, that you've spent a good deal of time, you know, developing your ability to do this thing and your ability to make beautiful objects. And then you will regard them as more meaningful and more important, and treasure them more and look after them. And they won't have that same disposable kind of quality. Oh, I can just go and buy another one of them.
An appreciation of value.
Yeah, the value in the object created. I'm suggesting something to do like that anyway. Any thoughts or more question you want to ask at that point, or I'll move on to other things? I feel I got a little bit incoherent somewhere, but hopefully it's making some sense.
No, I think you are.
Am I making some sense?
You're making absolute sense. Yeah,
that's the encouragement I needed there. Well done, Jeff.
Yeah, don't stop.
Don't stop now. Well, let's talk about relating then.
Yeah.
Relating, because it's something or if I reflect back to this notion of restoring, I think part of a different story is this reconnecting and re-embedding ourselves back into nature and dissolving that boundary between ourselves and nature, that we are part of nature. We are not separate and we're somehow not above. We are embedded, and that the way we conceptualize ourselves as separate beings, but we're not. We're breathing that air that we've polluted. We're eating the food from the ground. We're having to clean the water that we've poisoned. You know, that's all going into our bodies. That's all actually part of us. We're not separate. And there's other folks talk about, you know, energetically we're connected with stuff. You know, there's all kinds of connection. So to think of, to live in a predominantly individualistic culture is it's part of what leads us to be able to exploit nature.
Right.
It's like you wouldn't cut off your own arm just to make a few quid, but you will, you know, sometimes we do it inadvertently because nobody tells us it's happening, but we will destroy certain natural parts of the natural world in order to have a more convenient life, or a bit more pleasure, in inverted commas, because maybe it's pleasure or maybe it's not. Maybe it's just instant gratification that really doesn't do anything for us. So one of the other big bits about restoring is about relating. And I think most indigenous cultures talk a lot about being in relation and having respect, I suppose. Once you're in relation, and we'll talk about community and being in relation with other people, but it's also being in relation to the other than human world, having true empathy with other creatures. And you know, from that thing I was talking about, understanding the trees, the properties of the wood that they produce, that we can obtain and use to make things from, you develop a kind of different intimacy with those trees. It sounds weird saying you're intimate with a tree, but I think by interacting, that interaction is a relation, and it's an active relation and an appreciation of what the tree is giving or producing, or can be quite profound. So I think the act of taking wood and carving a spoon and understanding the properties of that wood leads you to have a different appreciation of a woodland when you see it, or a individual tree. And you won't necessarily be a precious one. It won't be like, oh, we couldn't possibly cut down any trees ever, or anything like that. But it's a kind of, if a tree had to come down, or part, you know, it would be about honouring that tree and you know, acknowledging it was part of the community of the woodland. And some of these things can sound very you know, initially can sound kind of very kind of inverted commas. I'm doing inverted commas here, people, you can't see. Like hippie or something, or new agey or something. It can get kind of dissed in that kind of way. But actually, it's not. It's quite a profound thing when you can kind of think of a tree as a relative. I'll tell you a little story that came into mind there. All right, God, it's turned to a bit of a therapy session for me. So that's fine. I had some mental health issues. I was getting very anxious for a period, and I wasn't sleeping well at all. This was about 18 months ago, 2 years ago. And I was under a lot of pressure with lots of stuff going on, all kinds of things going on family-wise, and my mother was very ill, and we were trying to do repairs on the house, and it was all going wrong, and the builder had run away, and it was just like nightmare time. And what I found super helpful, I'd get up in the morning and go out as quick as I could and do my stretches and go for a little run. Not a massive long run.
Mm-hmm.
But I had about 3 trees, big trees, that I stopped at on that run. And I'd stop at each tree and I'd do this little stretching exercise I do where I crouch down and I slowly stretch back up. Mm-hmm. So I crouch down tiny like a little seed on the ground and I stretch up with my arms up like the branches of a tree. And I express gratitude to the tree. And I found that enormously helpful. And I found it really well, again, I felt much more connected with myself and with the earth. It's kind of going little by down in the earth and stretching up towards the sky and looking up at the tree. So that's a little practice I do around trees that somehow also relates to this respect I have for trees now, which has grown through my woodworking and my using the materials they produce. And it goes to, and acknowledging, it's like I'm very into mushrooms, the edible kinds that you can collect around the place. I'm very into all kinds of mushrooms, but I was going to talk about the edible ones and how the trees have relation with the mushrooms, and acknowledging that kind of connectivity. So, relating to nature, relating to the other than human, do you want to say a bit more about community and the woodworking community? And you said it had kept you carving to some extent.
Well, I mean, I realised probably last year that my dominant friend group is the green woodworking community now. Mm-hmm. And yeah, sort of as in my 20s, I was very into going to clubs in London, and I had a group of friends around that. And then sort of as that's not been a thing in my life anymore, that sort of fizzled out. But yeah, it was quite interesting to realise that the people that I would generally choose to spend time with were the green woodworking lot. And there's been events where I've gone to, like a spoon fest or something, and I haven't really done any spoons. I just sat around the fire and nattered with people, and and some of those people have gone on to be sort of the people I go to when I need help, or they are. I've very much found a group of people which are not always completely similar, but a lot of them are of the same mindset, of the same, quite often brain type.
Yeah.
And then as I say, it's sort of, because I keep wanting to go to these events, it sort of keeps me thinking about green woodworking sometimes. And
so one thing I would say about that community is I think that there's a great generosity.
Yes, I was just going to say that. Yeah.
There you go.
Sharing.
Let's say sharing and generosity together. And sharing, because there's a lot of skills sharing, and then maybe that leads to other kinds of sharing. Mm-hmm. So there's some honesty there.
Yeah.
Maybe there's more honesty than you would typically meet with people you bumped into down the pub.
Yes.
Somehow.
Depends on the pub.
Depends on which pub. All right. Depends on which pub. We'll see.
Yeah. I'll take you down the White Horse later and we'll see.
Okay. So one of the things I wanted to mention around relating was one of the things that happened within the spoon carving community is people swap spoons and even just give stuff. So there's a lot of gifting.
Yeah.
And the act of gifting, because a lot of, for a long time, the gift economy was the primary economy.
Yep.
Gifts and debt kind of were interrelated in a lot of communities, because you would give, but there would be some reciprocity expected from it.
Yeah.
Not enforced, but kind of, because it creates relation. And and that's another thing with craft, that because a crafted item is not a commodity, so it's unique. Each piece is unique, and usually it comes with its own story that you may actually know the maker, particularly if it's a result of something you've swapped with someone. You know that person, and then you have the thing, the spoon or the bowl or the cup, whatever it was that they made that you're using. And you see people, they post on Instagram, don't they, saying, I'm having breakfast with Amy and Matt and Fred or whatever. And that's the bowl and the cup and the spoon they used. And it does feel like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah?
Yeah, very much so.
So you have a big spoon rack on your wall, don't you?
I do.
Yeah.
All of my friends.
So it does. It gives that, it keeps you in relation with that person in a totally different way to if they'd given you a set of metal spoons that they bought at Argos as a present. It's completely different to that, because it's unique and it's been crafted by their hands and what have you.
Yeah. It's had their time and their attention, and it's embodied with a lot.
So anyway, I've got a gift for you here. Not a spoon.
Right.
Are you getting any time to carve spoons at the moment?
I'm about to come and live up here and do
you are, aren't you?
nothing but.
So when you're here carving on spoons,
what is this?
we have a piece of this completely bonkers hawthorn.
Wow.
So it's been sealed, so it was not going to go off, but
Oh, brilliant.
it's got unbelievable colour through it.
That is something
So
special.
that half piece of log I've given you there, the rotten side is gone. You've got the solid side, and it's got black bits in it, and it's got splashes, it's got crazy bits, and all different colours.
That is a beautiful
So
thing.
somewhere in there, you'll find a few outrageous pieces of wood to turn into spoons.
Yeah. Cool. And then people that become patrons and for the podcast.
It's tough to carve, though. You talk about it being hard and making you humble. That's a bit of wood that might humble you.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you.
There you are. I've been sharing it with just a few folks.
Yeah.
So you're one of the special ones.
I'm honoured.
They were clearing, I'll tell you where the wood came from, in the woodland behind the woodyard over in Tetbury, where I know you've been.
Oh, yes.
They've been clearing the ash. A lot of it has died back.
Yeah.
And to bring a big caterpillar tracked grabby thing into the woods, they had to make access, and they cut a limb off a big old hawthorn. And I went and looked, and it had this amazing, it's monstrous, yeah. For a hawthorn, it's really big.
Yeah.
And that's just like one arm of it that was sticking out in the way of this giant digger. And I saw it, and I had to go in with a chainsaw and chop it up, and I had to sneak back in the night time when the workmen weren't around and steal this hawthorn out. And then I was in bed in the night, and I was really achy back and shoulders, and I couldn't think what I'd done. And then I remembered, I'd been carrying big lumps of hawthorn across the fields on my back.
Under the cover of darkness.
Under the cover of darkness. So I could bring them out and give them to my friends.
Aww.
So I have a few more bits to give to people who've expressed interest, but...
well, thank you. It's I don't know if you saw, I did an Instagram post a little while back. Mm-hmm. Just some photos of some spoons that I'd carved. Yeah. And I was suddenly struck by just the level of beauty within them. And there's sort of the subjective beauty of the actual, what form I'd managed to create. And then there's the wood and the patterns in the wood. But then there's also the community side. Like some bits came from Dan up in Ellicker's Wood.
Yeah.
And some bits came from Deborah from London. And, you know, they were carved, sat round with different people. Like I was carved one, sat next to Andrea.
Yeah.
And that's the first time I've met her. And it's like, you know, there's all these beautiful connections that come from some chunks of wood that have, you know, bothered with a knife and an axe. And yeah, so I think that's right on with the story.
Yeah, exactly. That is sort of exactly elements of that new story. And all of this is, I mean, it's not completely free, but it's certainly not expensive. It's not like you have to pay a load of money to do spoon carving every time you want to do it. You've had to make some, you know, investment in your knives and axes. But like a lot of things that can bring a lot of pleasure and gratification and bring relationship and reconnection, because exactly what you were talking about there, and that was about reconnecting with beauty and recognizing beauty and acknowledging, you know, this was beauty, or some elements of the beauty there you had created through your carving, and some elements were inherent in the wood, but some of the beauty was also in the meaning that's carried from knowing the story of that piece of wood.
Yep.
So this is all this sort of deepening and connection that allows us to relate differently, I think, to everything we do, and reflect differently. And that we're not just doing this in our heads, but it's a practice.
Yep.
Because it's a physical practice. So it isn't just heady. So that's an important part of it. And you're working with a sense of touch. It's very tactile. The objects you create are very tactile, as well as visually beautiful. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing.
I think it's interesting that it's all sort of wrapped up in, and I hesitate to use this word, a product, a thing. You know, like you can hold that spoon or that basket or whatever it is, and all of that is contained within it, while it's also just a functional thing. You know, and on one level, it's a functional, gets food in your face, and then you can really delve into it, and that is contained in that physical thing.
Yeah, and it's a utilitarian object. Having said that, I mean, yes, it is, and all those things are contained. Have you burned spoons?
With you, yes.
Have you practiced the practice? I think so. I was going to mention because that's very interesting, because there is also something quite profound in the letting go of that thing.
Yep.
And people don't understand when they first see people burning spoons. Okay. But it's another practice that is like a ritual practice, particularly if you've thought about the spoon you want to burn and why you might want to burn it. And it doesn't have to be for horrible reasons. It can be for all kinds of different reasons. You can project meaning into that thing you're burning. And it's quite good to do, you know, in a group, and to make some statement as to why you're burning and hear why other people are burning spoons. You know, and then you've destroyed the object that you made or that you've been given, whatever. But it has still story attached to it and meaning attached to it, and sometimes it can feel like it changed some little thing in yourself when you've done it. And I'm struggling to remember specific examples. I mean, one thing I'd say is I think if I ever carved a perfect spoon, I would have to burn it. Because if I carved a perfect spoon and kept it, and I knew I could never make anything more perfect, I'd have to give up spoon carving. So my only real option would be to destroy it. And partly I say that because I know it'll annoy people. But I also know I'm never going to carve a perfect spoon, so it's not really a problem.
Yeah, perfect's not a
Not a
real thing.
So it's very. I spent ages teasing Andrea all summer about trying to do perfect things.
Right.
So, mind you, just recently she has done a few practically perfect spoons. I'm sure there's little faults in them if you're very critical. But
Wow.
I think she should burn them. Get back to basics. Anyway, I'm sorry. It was just a thing that's been running through my head. I kind of, unless you got questions that have popped up or other things you fancy saying.
I suppose I do. My question is, how could we make this a larger thing? No, and I'm not necessarily talking about spoon carving. I'm maybe talking about, if we're to save the world with this restorying, how could this sort of expand outwards to connect with other people in their lives?
Well, there you are. Well, I mean, certainly, if I'm placing this as a thing I'm wanting to explore more.
Oh yeah, sorry, I don't expect you to have a perfect.
No, I
answer.
wasn't saying it that way. So I was kind of saying to anyone who listens to this and finds some of what we've talked about to hold meaning for them or have some congruence with things they're thinking, I'm very, very happy to hear from them.
Oh, I see.
And would
Yes.
like to be in conversation with them. So we could think of this chat we're having now as a bit of a conversation starter, or a kind of a provocation, if you like. And my challenge, so my provocation is, I think we should regard this practice as something much more important than a little hobby we do.
Yeah.
But actually, acknowledge it that it is a radical act because it is anti-capitalist and anti-consumption, and it's about uniqueness, and it's about relating, and it's about reconnecting, and it's about being in community, and it's about respecting nature. And that those are all part of the analogy I like about the story that needs to emerge, the new stories that we will live by, is the analogy of weaving cloth, and that we are each a thread within that cloth, but together we weave. So, this is one of the threads, and what I would quite like to find is other people who are, weaving a similar pattern and want to come, and work together to weave a piece of this new narrative around craft practice and the way in which engaging in that practice transforms the practitioner. So I think I would postulate that carving spoons changes the carver, and that's quite a profound thing. So I feel changed by having carved spoons for a few years, and by all the people I've met, yourself included, and and I hope in positive ways that helps me, reflect and relate and be more mindful in the ways I might try and bring about change in the world.
All right, thank you, Dave. Such a good episode. I'm so pleased. That really does. It wraps up kind of a lot of my thinking around craft and sustainability, and why I keep really putting these sorts of episodes in the podcast. Yeah, and you'll be pleased to know that we did indeed go to the White Horse and sat drinking beer and rummaging through a big box of spoons that Dave carries around with him, admiring every curve and detail. Okay, so Dave's links. Dave has sent a load of links. I'm just going to run through them very quickly, what they are. So the RYSE, RYSE, which is the Radical Youth Space for Educations. Check out the podcast, check out the blog. Good stuff going on there. Also, A School Called Home, which is Doug Aldhine and his recent book, At Work in the Ruins. Tyson Yunker Porter, for his promotion of yarning as a method of cooperative exploration of ideas. The book Sand Talk is in particular. So links to that. Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures. That is decolonialfutures.net. That's definitely worth a read. Martin Shaw and all of his books of wisdom. A good start is the podcast, The Smoke Hole Sessions, and the book Courting the Wild Twin. I'll put links to those. He says there's many others, too many to mention, but if any of this resonates with you, then please get in touch, and he is very happy to yarn with you to further explore and find new stories to live by. Yeah, really good. He signed off his message to me with good luck with the school. Just think of it in terms of the list on Decolonial Futures homepage. Do that stuff and you're well on track. Number 3 of the list is, it's all about composting our individual and collective shit and humility, joy, generosity and compassion. Trying to dig deeper and relate wider. Nice. Thanks for those, Dave. I've also put a link to the cortical homunculus. I'm not sure if that's how you say that. The thing... which is a distorted representation of the human body based on a neurological map of the areas and proportions of the human brain dedicated to processing motor functions or sensory functions for different parts of the body. I recommend you scroll down to the 3D models, which are quite the thing. Take a look at that. Also, Dave's Instagram, also Netcom Craft School, my Instagram. All of that sort of stuff. Right, the spoon giveaway. So if you'd like to win the very first spoon carved at Netcom Craft School from the wood that Dave gifted me in this episode, all you have to do is comment on the Instagram post for this episode on the Building Sustainability Podcast Instagram account. The post isn't going to mention a giveaway because I just want people like you who have listened all the way to the end to enter. No one else gets the chance. So if you just comment and say a reflection on what you've just heard or your favourite bit of the episode, and I'll pick a winner in a month or so. And yeah, someone will be eating with a delicious hawthorn spoon. The colours really are quite spectacular. Yes, if this was your first episode, then definitely subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And you've got 103 other episodes and some little bite-sizey ones. Don't miss those. Yeah, go plow back through the archives. But if this was your thing, then I'd recommend next one is episode with Barn the Spoon. It is episode 22 and it is on new wood culture. There's a link to that in the show notes. If you have enjoyed this, then please do take 2 seconds to share the episode to your favourite social media or tell your family or friend or person on the bus. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And finally, if you do find this podcast useful, then consider supporting via the Patreon page, patreon.com/building sustainability. It helps me out so much, and you get about 10 hours worth of bonus content to enjoy at your leisure. Great. That is it for me. I hope that you are happy and well and warm and smiling. I'm also smiling. Until next time, bye-bye.